Resident Evil 3 is alright. That's really the best way to put it. If you have experience with Resident Evil 2, you'll likely enjoy it. Outside of that though, the best way to describe the remake is a short, adventurous jaunt that's a bit too lacking in content to justify a $60 price tag. If it was $40 to $30, sure, but not for $60. I know that's a half-hearted statement, but if you want more details, we'll have to start back at the beginning. The original Resident Evil 3, released in 1999, was a game rushed through development in order to capitalize on the seeming blowout success of a series that only started 3 years prior in 1996. The year before, 1998, saw the release of Resident Evil 2, a game that was more or less a copy of the formula in the first game with a few tweaks. However, because of the rush job for developing the third game, lots of corners were cut. To that end, assets from the second game were recycled for certain sections, and it forced the focus to shift away from puzzle solving and survival horror to action gameplay. This resulted in a shorter story, and it all culminated in an overall shorter game. The Resident Evil franchise has a history of straying from its horror roots, and this was the first time it happened. Now, all of this background information is important because it properly frames and gives context to why a remake of a 21-year-old game feels like it was rushed through development to make Christmas sales. If it's not painfully obvious, it's because the Resident Evil 3 remake is a literal recreation of a game that was rushed through development to make Christmas sales 21 years ago. The main complaint here is how it's incredibly short. Where the Resident Evil 2 remake, released just 13 months earlier, totals in at about 12 hours long after playing both characters, Resident Evil 3 is only about 6 hours of gameplay total. Really, no matter how you slice it, that's just an absurdly short game. While the brief playtime is really the biggest sticking point, what makes it so noticeable is how good the game is in nearly every other way. There's just a huge conflict between the strangely short playtime and everything else. The attention to detail for the character models, environments, graphical effects, bombastic set pieces, and chase scenes, you name it, this game looks great, plays great, and the hard work put into making it is obvious. Corners were not cut in its creation. Sure, there have been redesigns and some areas were removed, but this isn't a half-done job. Thus, when you realize just how short the game is, instead of feeling like you got a half-baked experience, it feels more like you got half of a fully baked cake. The takeaway here is that overall, there just wasn't much to recreate, which is the main cause for the game being so short. Thus, you end up with a well-polished but oddly brief experience, creating a contrast that's all the more noticeable. Now, the length of the game aside, what is present is distinctly Resident Evil. As stated earlier, Resident Evil 3 is a more action-focused game, but that doesn't mean it's missing puzzles or odd collectibles. Overall, the game is divided up into roughly 5 sections, where you trade off playing as Jill Valentine and Carlos Oliveira in a strictly linear story. Jill's sections tend to be more focused on the puzzle solving and exploration, while Carlos's segments focus heavily on being outnumbered and just trying to get through the area to your objective. This actually creates a unique mix-up in gameplay, as when you're in control of Jill, chances are you'll have plenty of ammo to deal with whatever monster comes your way, but while playing as Carlos, you'll be trying to avoid enemies in an effort to conserve your limited ammo. This variation of scenarios each character faces is also fully displayed in how their movements differ. Jill is nimble and has the ability to dodge in any given direction, while Carlos tackles or punches enemies. Further related to this, Jill, despite doing more collecting, has a smaller inventory, which lends itself to running back and forth across the map. Meanwhile, Carlos is strapped with pockets from the start to hold on to nearly everything he finds, which supplies him to deal with larger numbers of zombies at once. There are quite a few sequences where this is played to maximum effect, too. For instance, Jill is hunted by the hulking creature Nemesis, and being able to dodge its attacks frequently comes in handy. Meanwhile, there's something special about Carlos punching zombies down while you spray and pray after discovering a surprise horde on the other side of a door. There are problems though, such as how your ability to heal is tied to whether or not you can open your inventory. For some strange reason, when you wind up flat on your back or are in the middle of any stun-locking animation, you aren't allowed to open your inventory to heal up. This creates situations where you have to panic and spam the menu button while still getting up in hopes that the inventory opens so you can get to the first aid spray before another incoming death blow lands. This problem existed in the last game, but with how action-focused Resident Evil 3 is, it borders between small and big problem due to how frequently it can happen. Luckily, this problem doesn't really share company though, so it's easy enough to overlook or give a pass to. After all, you can also get around it by just playing more cautiously. Anyway, the short and simple of it is that what's here works well, and the overall experience, while brief, is also good. This also makes Resident Evil 3 a fun experience, and good enough for repeat playthroughs. Before closing up though, there's one extra thing to address: the appended multiplayer experience called Resistance. This is a standalone 4v1 escape game, where you either play on a team of 4 survivors trying to complete objectives, or as the mastermind, who spawns enemies and tries to kill everyone off. This game mode is nothing particularly new or special, but it has plenty of potential. Currently, the main problem with the multiplayer system is its overall lack of content. There aren't many maps, only a handful of characters to play as, and there's no variety in the objectives you're tasked with completing. Another problem is the advantage curve for knowing the maps. As it stands, certain key items always spawn in the same places, which means experienced survivors or masterminds will easily roll over new players by knowing what points to always attack or defend. It's an unfortunate flaw that creates less of a power struggle and more of a lopsided and unhelpful get-good experience. That isn't to say that there's no depth or potential here though. Things could be better for sure, it just lacks real substance right now. As with most multiplayer experiences, it'll take time, patches, and additional content to show if this mode has any teeth, or if it's just a forgettable extra appended to a short single-player game in an attempt to justify a full price tag. As it stands though, it doesn't add a significant amount of value. But then again, I've never been much for multiplayer games to begin with, so mileage will vary. At the end of the day, Resident Evil 3 is a good game that plays great, has fantastic action sequences, and really helps to put a different type of pinch on you when things get hairy. It's not really long enough to justify its price tag though, and the included multiplayer mode, Resistance, adds a limited amount of value. Don't get me wrong, this game is worth playing. It's just not worth paying $60 for when the fun is over so quickly. For that reason, it gets a rating of buy, but only when the price tag falls to $40 or less. Thanks for watching and listening. I'm William Strife, and if you like this video, then please consider contributing to me at strife.solutions. Every dollar I get helps me keep the lights on so I can continue to make videos like this and others for you to enjoy. I hope to see you again in another video another time. Till then though, Strife out.